Alright everyone, welcome to another episode of the NPC Dungeon. As always, I am your host and game master for the time being. Today, I have another DM/GM tips and tricks episode prepared for you. It's all about how to work the shy player, so let's learn something. As somebody myself who takes a little while to warm up to new groups and new people, this is one that I thought was a pretty important topic specifically to cover. Maybe you're running a game with a player who maybe gets a little anxious around new groups, or is a little new to the game and is unsure of themselves and what to do. Or maybe you're the player. I know I was when I first started. Well, this episode is going to be geared more toward GMs and DMs because as one, I can say that a lot of the responsibility is on us to help them feel more comfortable at the table, but it's not solely on us. If you're playing in a game with a more introverted player, feel free to use some of these yourself. Obviously, you can't use all of them because some of them are about planning for the game, but you could bring some of these up with your GM if you think it'll help things out. So I have a 3-part kind of approach that I use with my players, and I'll be going over that first. Then I have a 4th addition to that approach that I like to use, and a couple more pointers that I want to tack on at the end. And along the way, I'll try to sprinkle in a few things to avoid if you want to help your players, especially newer players, become more comfortable being more involved at the table. After all, we want everyone to have fun, don't we? I'm going to begin with my 3 golden rules of trying to help players become more involved, and those are be conversational, give them time to shine, and be patient. I actually have these listed in order for a reason, so let's start with the first one. What do I mean when I say be conversational? Well, to understand this one, let's look at some of the common advice out there when it comes to helping players be more involved. A lot of people will say that when you see a player is not doing much or saying much, just ask what their character is doing. And generally, that's good advice. Definitely do this, but I want to make some additions to it and modify how you might go about it. For one thing, try not to just put them on the spot. Sure, there are some times when you can't avoid it, but one of the things that I like to do is not just check up on them when they're not doing anything. Periodically, ask them what they're up to. In fact, you should be doing this with all of your players anyway. When they start a short rest, ask them what they're doing. When they have downtime, ask them what they're doing. And when they enter a new town, ask them what they're doing. Checking up on all your players is just a good way to keep them engaged. It's good practice, and it even helps your less active players not to feel singled out or anything. I also want to say, try to work it into whatever you're doing or saying at the time. Don't just ambush your players with, what are you doing? Of course, if you're asking everyone, it's kind of part of the game and you really don't have to worry about this as much in that case. But if you find yourself in a situation where you have to ask a particular player what they're doing, then you should definitely try to smoothly transition to the question rather than just throwing it at them. One way of doing this can simply just be a matter of wording. Instead of saying, what are you doing? You can say something like, what do you think? Or is there anything you'd like to do now? It takes a little bit of the pressure off. It feels a little more natural, casual, and conversational, and less like you're trying to make a demand of them or something. But even better is to work it into the game somehow. Have the game ask them what they'd like to do, so to speak. Maybe they're in combat, they have an opportunity to help everyone escape or attack whatever monster's attacking them at the time. Maybe there's an NPC that decides to talk to them, or a trap that only they can see. And all this actually brings me to my next point, and that is, give them their time to shine. Remember earlier when I said that you should check up on your players periodically? Well, you should, definitely should, but there are some times that are more ideal than others. When you come across an encounter that you think one of your players is going to be really good at or really enjoy, don't be afraid to ask them if there's anything they'd like to do. You never know if they have an idea and are just too timid to voice it out themselves. In fact, you should be planning for this. Don't just wait for the perfect opportunity to come up. Be proactive and prepare to have little encounters that give your players and their characters' skills their moment in the spotlight. If you have a bard, maybe give them an opportunity to perform at a local inn. If you have a fighter, maybe there's a ring nearby they can fight in and maybe even earn a little extra money. Of course, all this depends on your players specifically and what they want to do. You need to be paying attention and seeing and making notes of the kinds of things they enjoy and that they're good at, and try to put opportunities for them to do those things in front of them. In fact, there's quite a bit of research that suggests that while crowds can be a little scary, positive feedback from a group might even make you more confident. It all depends on how you start out. If you start out shaky or fail something right off the bat, you're going to read everyone else's reactions as negative and trip up even more and just kind of start to spiral. But if you start out well, the opposite kind of happens. So as a GM, you want the latter to happen more often than not. But yes, I hear what you're thinking. but I thought the goal was to put my players through challenges and make them struggle a little. Whatever happened to a good hard-fought victory? And yes, you're right, but right now, I'm not talking about how to run a game and make difficult encounters and challenges for your players. No, I'm talking about how to help them set themselves up so that they're ready for those encounters. Besides, isn't the ultimate goal of any encounter for your players to win anyway? I'm not saying make the whole thing easy. What I'm saying is arrange certain parts of it so that all your players have opportunities to do what they're good at. These opportunities can still be challenging, and even then they may not even be what wins the encounter for them. But the point is that they were there, and that's what matters. But I want to add a little word of warning here. Be careful in providing things specifically for your players to do. I said something similar to this in my episode on combat. If you haven't listened to that one, feel free to give it a listen. But for now, I said that this isn't a video game. Your players shouldn't have to do anything. Don't make an encounter with only one solution that a player would be really good at, because even though yes, you are technically planning for them to succeed, you might also be setting them up for failure. What if they never find it? No matter how obvious you try to make it, this is still a very real possibility, and it's not their fault. What may be super obvious to one person may not be to someone else. We're all different after all. What I like to do is not plan my encounters around my players. This may seem to contradict everything I just said, but hear me out. I design encounters based on what's just happened in the story, or where they are, or whatever factor like that flows narratively into it. And then I start thinking about my players. Only then do I start to think about the kinds of ways they'd want to go about it or how they would try to overcome it. And then I plan for that. This is how I try to give my players opportunities to shine. And again, like I always say, you won't be able to plan for everything your players might do. Think of as many solutions as you can, as well as many that you can think of that they might want to do based on what you know about them, and then use those to form that toolbox I'm always talking about that you can then pull from. In fact, I might actually make my whole next episode all about how I plan for encounters. That point's really important. Giving your players time to shine is one of the most potent tools you have in your toolbox when it comes to helping your players feel comfortable at the table. Remember it, because I'll be coming back to it later, but for now, I'm going to talk a little bit about patience. This one's actually really crucial to keep in the back of your mind. Remember that this isn't going to happen overnight. You won't just play one session and suddenly one of your more timid players is going to be super active all of a sudden. That's just not how it works. Different people will warm at different speeds, and as GMs, that's just something we have to accept. This is precisely why I said to check up on your players periodically. Don't try to force anyone to become more involved than they want to. They'll open up at their own speed. Your job is just to give them the opportunities to do so. And often, you'll find that people are aware of it. You may find that you have a player who apologizes or says they don't know what they're doing or asks a lot of questions. In moments like these, don't belittle them, don't make fun of them, don't laugh at them. We all started out that way. Just answer the question and reassure them that they're doing fine. Since this is often the case with new players, I'm going to go ahead and add the point, don't hold them to the same standards that you would hold a more experienced player to. They'll make mistakes, and that's fine, we all do. I still do. Don't shame them for it. You can make suggestions without being rude about it. If they're always having to look up spells, suggest that they take a picture or write it down. If they forget which die is which, that's fine too. Just remind them and move on. A lot of people want to say that that's such a problem, but it's not. It takes like 2 seconds. Again, just be patient. Actually, I'm realizing that a lot of these points fall in line with some advice that I already have stored away for managing your players and preparing for the randomness they might try to do. So look out for an episode on that in the future. But lastly, for this point, don't let all this cause you to underestimate them. Your players will surprise you. Be glad when they do, because you played a crucial role in creating the setting that allowed them to do that. This is what you want them to be doing. And what about that secret 4th point that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode? This one's really easy, so I probably won't even spend that much time on it, but I still think it's definitely worth a mention. It's eye contact. Now, let me clarify, I know that's kind of a scary phrase. When I say eye contact, I don't necessarily mean that you have to be looking at all your players in the eyes. Some people don't need it, others might not like it. What I mean is to say, mind who you're looking at. Don't spend the whole session just looking at a few people. Remember, you're not just having a conversation with a few people, you're talking to an entire group. Your other players may read this as you only talking to them and be less willing to speak up. Now, sometimes, yes, you'll be playing an NPC who literally is only talking to just one person, but in most other cases, it's generally best to be engaging all your players. What I like to do is at least once per encounter, I like to glance around the table. As you go, you'll learn your players and you'll pick up on which ones respond well to this and which ones don't, and how to best balance this in your games. Now, my last couple of pointers here are also going to be kind of brief, and they both go back to what I said earlier about giving your players time to shine. The first one is use their backstories. Just like a lot of what I'm saying here today, this can apply to more than just a shy player, and is in fact something you should probably be doing with all your players anyway. Implementing a player's backstory is just a good way of getting a player engaged and even maybe calling them to action. And finally, what's the point of doing anything in D&D if it's not going to impact the world around you in some way? I like to make sure that the player's actions have effects and consequences in the world around them. Positive ones can reward them for a clever idea, and negative ones can move the story forward and even give them new challenges to have and overcome. The point is, if your players feel they have no sway on how the world functions, how can you expect them to want to do anything and be involved at all? On the other hand, if their characters live in a dynamic world that's always reacting to what they do, then they might be more motivated to act and influence it in different ways. It's important to have the world react in a realistic but balanced way, but that's kind of outside of the scope for today's episode, so I'm going to end it there today. So, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my take on how to deal with some of the shyer and more timid players you may encounter. It was kind of a short one, but after all, everyone should be allowed to have fun. And as always, until next time, let's learn something.